While episode 6, Smallfolk, is largely being decimated by user ratings, I actually think this is an improvement over last week's episode. Because while Smallfolk is still doing quite a bit of build-up, there's at least a handful of scenes that are driven by suspense, which in turn makes these scenes more captivating and makes the overall episode more exciting. I think this balance of build-up and payoff is better this time around, and the pace isn't as troublesome as last week's. But since there are only 8 episodes this season, it's starting to become worrying as to how much plot development there'll be in the last 2 episodes. Normally in the Game of Thrones universe, the last 2 episodes tend to really pop off, so hopefully that also carries over into House of the Dragon Season 2. If that is the case, then I think episodes 5 and 6 being slower and having more development will be justified. Going into the actual episode, it's nice to see the Lannister army, and them bringing a lion is pretty insane. I think that's clear setup that we'll see that beast unleashed in a future episode, which will be epic. But as always, the Green Council scenes are excellent. I feel like this has been a motif for my reviews this season and always commending these scenes. But now that they're driven by Aemond, it highlights a large contrasting point of personalities between him and Aegon. Seeing Aemond be resilient to blatant political posturing and kiss-assery, and him essentially swatting all of that away, makes him a captivating character in this setting. He's much more acute and observant to everyone's hidden motivations, and witnessing him lambast and maneuver around the setting is wholly engaging. Along with Ewan Mitchell, who plays Aemond, having incredible line delivery. Like the opening line of the scene instantly energizes it.
He dares to summon me with haste.
Out of all the things I've commended in the show, I think the casting director did arguably the most impressive job because some of these actors have been incredible hidden gems, even more so than Game of Thrones, which might be an unpopular opinion. Also, I love the end of the scene where we briefly see Aemond's humanity shine through via Alicent trying to connect to him as a mother. There's a subtle brilliance to the cinematography and editing here, in which we have 2 separate shots of Aemond's face. One that shows us his eye, which communicates his warmth and emotion, and a side profile that is harsh and devoid of those aspects. So going from one shot on his eye, conveying a sense of bonding with his mother, to his side profile, really punctuates him rejecting this moment of connection. This scene from an acting, directing, editing, and cinematography perspective is flooring, and I really want to highlight this due to all the hate this episode is receiving. Going over to Rhaenyra's side of trying to get Sir Darkland to tame a dragon, I think this is the most interesting development that has happened since Damon has left. Even though it's very clear that the man is going to die, but the way this scene is executed still makes this worthwhile. The pacing, I think, is one of the strongest aspects of the scene, in which we wait for a dragon to show up, and in the meantime, everyone gets more and more tense. That, and as always, the dragon VFX and how much personality is able to be portrayed through the dragon's performance is pretty insane. This just reinforces the great production value of the show. But in this scene, I also want to address the wider story implications of Seasmoke seeking a new rider. It was said in an earlier episode that Seasmoke was restless and in distress, which could possibly indicate that Rhaenyra died off-screen, severing the bond he had with Seasmoke and thus making the dragon a free agent. However, through especially analyzing Season 5 of Game of Thrones and why it was devoid of logic, it's insinuated that dragons have such a strong neurological bond with their riders that they can even find their rider's location. This happens throughout Game of Thrones, like Drogon coming in to save Daenerys in the dragon pit before she dies, and Drogon responding immediately to Dany being killed by Jon. David and Dan did seem to use those moments at the convenience of the plot, and was kind of inconsistent since Dany was in distress at other points in the story, and Drogon didn't show up. But this still establishes an important precedence of the mechanic of the bond between a dragon and their rider being so strong to the point that the dragon can find them. This bond is still shown at the end of the first season where Cyrox shares in Rhaenyra's pain during childbirth. So, Seasmoke not being able to find Rhaenyra is a bit confusing given this established mechanic, and I know there are some changes between these 2 shows. I just find it weird that they would change the nuanced mechanics of the bond between dragons and their riders. It just makes this mechanic more confusing given the inconsistency between the 2 shows. Besides this point though, it makes sense that Seasmoke would seek out someone of similar lineage to Rhaenyra, even though it's then immediately confusing how Seasmoke finds becomes this character and was never able to track down Rhaenyra. Pivoting away from dragons and their bonds with riders, since I'm kind of falling down a rabbit hole here, we have more Damon hallucinating in Harrenhal scenes. Now, I understand the frustration of these scenes, and I can finally sympathize with the point that these scenes really stall the plot and pace of the narrative. And even though I love Paddy being able to come back and reprise his role, these scenes don't really convey that much character development because they come off as redundant. I know that Damon has grown as a character, but in episode 8 it's shown that he deeply cares for his brother, and that's even alluded to throughout season 1, even though he was kind of harsh within those first 2 episodes. So this comes off as redundant character development, and doesn't seem like it's an efficient usage of our time. Because of this, it seems like his 3 primary scenes of hallucinations between young Rhaenyra, banging his mother, and revisiting Viserys could have been condensed narratively. However, I can see why these scenes are laid out this way in the plot from a writing perspective. Because without these hallucinations, the Harrenhal subplot would basically just be brief plot points of the developments within the Riverlands, with not much depth. And I think this would also further highlight how fast this is all happening between these characters quickly traveling around the Riverlands. So having these hallucinations may slow down the pace in the subplot, but it does so to not highlight another issue in showing how unrealistically fast these developments are, while also attempting at making the subplot deeper. Although I think the character development for Damon in these dreams could be better, and I wouldn't classify these scenes as being bad. I do also personally like any kind of exploration of the mystical side of the world and overall gods. I find that stuff very intriguing, even though it doesn't advance the plot. That, and I think Simon Strong brings much needed levity to this subplot, and I particularly love the moment where he's trying to de-escalate Damon by shushing him. There's also another subtle moment with his character where he gives a small sly smile at Alice being the last person to treat Lord Grover before his death. It's a fun little nuanced acknowledgement, and hopefully, this finally means that the Harrenhal plot will start to pick up a bit. It's also interesting narratively how Damon kind of fails and is at the mercy of being helped by Alice. It's kind of a similarity between Rhaenyra's pairing with Mysaria, where she also desperately needed help. Like Alice, Mysaria's motivation is a bit of a mystery as well, although until recently. So Alice's devotion to Damon has an alluring hook, and I'm interested in seeing how they develop that in the future and where it goes as to what her personal motivations are. But since I mentioned it, let's address the elephant in the room, which is Mysaria this episode. From what I've seen, a lot of fans are treating the gay relationship development between Rhaenyra and Mysaria as an atrocity for the writing, and that this is basically just bad fanfiction now. And while I do think this moment is flawed and essentially comes out of nowhere and is pretty jarring, I don't think it's anywhere as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. And if anyone is saying that the show is pushing an agenda now, then I feel like they're overlooking the fact that there have already been gay characters in the show. So her developing a bond with the only person who is giving her affirmation and support, I don't think is that unbelievable. It would have been nice if this was alluded to a bit more, since it didn't seem like Rhaenyra before this was developing a personal relationship with Mysaria. It seemed mostly professional, especially since Mysaria is a very uptight and serious character. Maybe if they showed Mysaria becoming more disarmed and comfortable around Rhaenyra, then this moment wouldn't have come out of left field. I also wouldn't be surprised if the writers are throwing in this moment to inject some spice into the subplot, since it's been very sparse of any interesting flavors. This may also be overlooked, but I think this new development of Rhaenyra's sexual orientation recontextualizes her relationship with Alicent in season 1 when they were kids. There felt like a bit of underlying subtextual love between them, so it'll be interesting to rewatch those scenes now, assuming this was actually planned from the start. So overall, I don't think this is a bad development, and we'll have to wait and see how this plays out, because for all we know, this could fizzle out or even blossom into something bigger. It's simply too early to judge how big of a deal this is, and everyone making a massive deal out of this seems silly to me. The more troubling aspect of this scene, in my opinion, is Mysaria as a character, because through her revealed backstory, she's literally just a female version of Varys, which is pretty disappointing. Her personality is obviously a bit different, but it seems odd to make the Spy Master character have virtually the same backstory as Game of Thrones' Spy Master. It really detracts from her character's intrigue and overall quality since she's lacking of originality. I don't know if this is something that George wrote or if it's the show writers, but I think they should have differentiated her more instead of her coming across as a gender-swapped Varys. Moving along, there are quite a few green scenes I haven't talked about, and then I'll finally address the climactic Riot scene. The scene where Aemon flat out threatens Aegon is terrifying given his position, and Larys realizing this and taking advantage of Aegon is great. I'm really excited to see how this develops in the future since this is like pure Game of Thrones political excellence. The current climate of the Green Council is so captivating that it really makes the black side of the narrative seem boring in comparison, even though I wouldn't say it's that bad. Then Alicent has a surprisingly great dialogue scene with her brother in which they talk about Darren. It's nice to see Alicent so relieved that she at least has one nice son, and the question about whether the Red Keep was a bad environment for raising children, or if it was Alicent being a bad mother, was an interesting conundrum. The way the writers explore this scene, I think, was really well done, while also greatly establishing the warm relationship between Alicent and Gwaine. The actor who plays Gwaine in particular does a great job here, and adds a lot of meaning to the scene through his quick expressions. Then everything with the smallfolk I think is pretty critical in terms of building up to a point that this all explodes into a riot. Seeing their perspective throughout the episode is essential for the audience to understand the feelings and general mentality of the smallfolk. I still see people classify these scenes as being filler, but without this perspective, we wouldn't sympathize with them. If these scenes were cut, this population would become significantly more hollow, and would just be an entity applying pressure to the green characters. I also saw some debates about how it's unrealistic how King's Landing is running out of food, and thus this conflict is contrived. But in the first episode, it's established that most of the local food is going to the royals and the dragons. Given that, dragons and especially Vhagar require a lot of food to operate, so that alone probably eliminates locally outsourced food, and sustaining a population of about 1 million people is impossible without consistent shipments from the sea. So I think this development isn't that unrealistic. As for the actual riot, the scene was great. It perfectly captures the feeling of panic, and the moment the inexperienced Kingsguard cuts off the beggar's arm, and that unleashing the horde was such a euphoric moment. Like, I honestly didn't think Aegon appointing these buffoons would have much payoff, or at least that quickly, and this was a great point to really punctuate their anti-knight personas. This chaos is also edited really well, from bouncing between Helen and Alicent trying to run away, the Kingsguard fighting the public, the more experienced guy trying to rein them in, and crowd reaction shots. It's a perfect little scene that I wish could have been a bit longer, and it may be this way because of how big the set was. But regardless, the execution of the scene and the amount of extras used were very impressive. Overall, episode 6 is nowhere near as bad as the ratings are implying, and I assume it's getting a review bomb because Rhaenyra kissed Mysaria. This currently seems extremely overblown, and if it's troubling you that much, then I don't really know what to say other than this episode clearly isn't as bad as season 8 of Game of Thrones in terms of quality.
Because I have balls, and you don't.
One was a constant example of terrible writing, while here, there may be some small flaws here and there, but there's still a strong permeating quality that has stayed persistent from season 1. And I know people are upset with the pace, but even this episode had quite a bit of payoff, and the following episodes will most likely have some major plot points. Thank you for watching, and my socials are in the description. As a side note, it's getting a little troubling that HBO is starting to slap these videos with copyright claims, and are even stating that these reviews aren't within fair use, which is pretty wild since that's an established precedent. So if you want to support the channel unlike HBO, which is very crushing, then I have channel memberships and a Patreon. Hopefully this doesn't escalate and they go after each review because that would be financially crippling. As usual, thank you to my top patron Logan Farmer for continuing to support me.